Hi, welcome. I'm so happy that you're here. I have created a Victorian study guide for the modern mind, and today I'm sharing the complete full curriculum that I made. The reason why I decided to make such a detailed study guide for myself and for you as well is because I got inspired by all the classics, the beautiful works that authors wrote, and by reading the biographies and their backgrounds and just how much they knew about all kinds of topics. I wanted to create a guide for myself with all of the basics and things that I want to learn over the course of my life. I've also listed all of the reasons why I wanted to do this and commit myself to such a long-term goal. First of all, this variety in topics can really change your view and opinions about the world. It'll help with historical depth. It will hopefully help me with the ability to connect ideas across centuries. I also want to be able to discover new fields of interests and things that I am really passionate about. I hope it will help me with arguments and understanding, and also to speak more clearly. And of course, I also wish to become a better writer, a better conversationalist, a better thinker, and a better reader. I will make this template available on my Patreon and maybe Substack as well, but I will put the link in the description box. This is my complete study plan that you can download for free. You don't have to pay, you don't have to become a member, just click on the link and it will lead you to the post. If you enjoy this content and find it helpful, then you would make me very happy by just liking this video and maybe even leaving a comment so it can spread to more people. You can just use my list if you want, but you could also follow along and add things that you find interesting as we go along. Hey Toulouse! If there are topics that you find extremely interesting and that you're resonating with a lot, then of course you will go deeper on that topic and spend more time with it. It's also going to be extremely helpful to write notes on whatever topic you're learning about. Back in the days, they called it a commonplace book. I have a lot of videos about that topic. If you want to, you can watch those as well. But the important thing is that when we are learning and writing things down, you also have to return to what you have written down, because without this frequent revisiting, you won't remember what you learned. So if you learn about plants, you will recite the lesson the next day. You can also rewrite your notes. If you make them on your computer, you can write them out by hand in a special notebook. If you're studying a language, you can also take parts of your study session and translate that into the language that you're learning. It's also going to be handy if you could pick one day a week, for example on Sundays, where you review everything that you have learned throughout the week. And just a few more warnings before I dive into this very extensive list. First of all, this list is so extensive and I know it can feel very overwhelming. So don't see it as a project that you can finish. I see this list as a lifelong companion. I also want to say that you could do so much in 1 or 2 years. You will be astounded. When I look at how much progress I made in 1 and 2 years, it is incredible, and I'm so proud of all the things that I have learned throughout those years. For me, this is not just another stress factor in my life. This is something that I'm doing for myself, and it's some kind of escape. And finally, 19th century education was overwhelmingly Western. It was classical, Eurocentric, focused on Greece, Rome, and Europe, and Christian. Just so you know, okay? Please let me know if I have made any mistakes, and I will correct them as soon as I can. And one final note, I am really sorry if I'm pronouncing certain names wrongly. I'm really trying to do my best. The first pillar that was important was ancient classics and mythology. We have the fathers of history. We have Herodotus and Thucydides. Plutarch's lives, Greek mythology like Homer, Hesiod, and Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Roman literature like Ovid, Virgil, Cicero, Seneca, Horace, Catullus, Livy, Tacitus, Suetonius, and Aurelius. Medieval epics like Dante, the Song of Roland, Nibelungenlied, Beowulf, Le Morte d'Arthur, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Saint Augustine, Canterbury Tales, Travels of Marco Polo, and the Renaissance like Shakespeare, Edmund Spenser, and Marlowe. I've also added a small selection of world classics that were known or becoming known in the 19th century just to enrich this list a little bit. We have the 1001 Nights, the Analects, Gilgamesh, the Bhagavad Gita, and Shahnameh. The second pillar is history. Here I have noted archaeology, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, medieval Europe, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, French Revolution, Victorian era, important historical figures, a few examples, Nostradamus, the Romanovs, Jeanne d'Arc, Cleopatra, Napoleon, Caesar, Alexander the Great, Leonardo da Vinci, Shakespeare, and so on. Then I have the history of the British Empire, the American Revolution, and the history of science and invention. The next one is philosophy and ethics, and this is one that I'm working really hard on right now. The pre-Socratic philosophy. We have Thales, Anaximander, Anaximenes, Pythagoras, Parmenides, Empedocles, Democritus, and Heraclitus. Then we have the sophists, Protagoras, Gorgias, Hippias, and Thrasymachus. Then Aristotle, Plato, the Stoics like Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca the Younger. You have the founders of Stoicism like Zeno of Citium, Cleanthes of Assus, and Chrysippus of Soli. Then we have medieval philosophy like Augustine, Aquinas, and others. The Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire, Rousseau, many others, Diderot, Kant. And the early modern philosophy, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Hobbes, and so many others. The 19th century, we have Nietzsche, Emerson, Hegel, Fichte, Schelling, Schopenhauer, Kierkegaard, Marx, John Stuart Mill, and so on. And then we study the aesthetics. We study Cicero's moral philosophy, Butler's sermons, and Scottish common sense realism. The next pillar is language, rhetoric, and logic. Of course, language learning was important. They learned Latin or Greek, but of course, you can also pick another language if you want. French was also very important, and German as well. I speak Dutch, French, and English, and I started Latin a while ago because I really want to learn Latin, but I'm now focusing on getting my French to an expert level, just to be able to read that very fluently without looking up too many words when I read classic literature, which is still going to be a pretty long journey, I think. But eventually I want to go back to my Latin and really work on that as well. Then we have etymology, the study of origin and historical evolution of words. Rhetorical devices, which is a technique to persuade people, to evoke emotion, to make arguments more memorable. Then we have classical oratory, which was the ancient art and study of persuasive public speaking, and this was developed in ancient Greece and Rome. The logic of Aristotle, propositional logic, predicate logic, model logic, Gödel's incompleteness theorems, Quintilian's institutio oratoria, classical composition, grammar, and composition. The next pillar is the fine arts and aesthetics. We have paintings and sculptures. For example, you could do all the movements and pick 5 painters from every movement. Knowing the basics of music theory was also important. And then we have architecture, the classical orders, and the Gothic revival. The next pillar is science. Natural philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, chemistry, botany, zoology, and natural history, geology, geography, anatomy. The next pillar is religion. For me, I only have the Bible on here because, of course, I was looking for the Western education, and because this is going to be the most interesting for me personally. You can add any religions that you want here. I eventually want to expand. I've been trying to get my way through the Bible, but I'm having a really hard time with this. But yes, even as someone who doesn't believe in God, I want to have a basic understanding of the Bible, if only to understand all the references in classic literature that are so often marked in the footnotes or the endnotes of a classic book. And then we have poetry, meter, rhyme, stanza, blank verse, classical poetry like Homer, Hesiod, Virgil, Horace, and Ovid, medieval and Renaissance poetry like Dante, Chaucer, Spenser, Shakespeare's sonnets, The Romantics like Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Shelley, and Keats. Victorian poetry like Tennyson, Browning, Christina Rossetti, and Matthew Arnold. And then the American poetry, Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, and Longfellow. And then some important Victorian extra skills that you can practice is memorization. Really, really important. They had to remember quotes, passages, parts of the Bible. They had to recite poetry, parts of books, and texts. Also important is critical thinking. I recently made a video about this, so go and check that out if you're interested. And penmanship, also really important. Mental arithmetic, map drawing. They had to draw outlines of countries. I would know where to start. You had to know your rivers, your mountain ranges, capitals, seas, and oceans. And then, of course, letter writing and writing essays. Of course, I will keep sharing my progress with you all on this channel, and I will keep making videos about the books I read. And now you can start mapping out your own study plan. If you're trying the full plan or if you're doing just parts of it, I wish you the best of luck. Thank you for watching, and if you're subscribed, I will see you next week.